To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land. Wow, that greeting, it really gives you that feeling, doesn't it? That joy and wonder.
It really does. It's iconic.
But have you ever really thought about what an audacious, almost impossible thing it was to create Disneyland? Especially back then, in the 1950s.
Oh, absolutely. The challenges were immense.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into that incredible journey. It was often chaotic, but ultimately, well, triumphant, wasn't it? Building this park.
Definitely. And our mission here,
Yeah.
is to dig into those sources you sent over, pull out the real nuggets of knowledge.
Go beyond the usual stories.
Exactly. Uncover the surprising bits, the ingenious solutions, and just the sheer willpower it took. Turning this impossible dream into, well, what it is today.
A global phenomenon.
Right. We're not just looking at what happened, but really why it matters.
Yeah.
Giving you that shortcut to understanding the whole achievement.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning then. Because this whole idea, it wasn't cooked up in some boardroom, was it?
Not at all. It was deeply personal for Walt. Came from his daddy's days, out with his daughters.
Right, taking them to, local amusement parks, merry-go-rounds.
Yeah, and he'd just sit there on a bench eating peanuts, watching them. And he had this thought, this kind of realization.
And parents were bored.
Pretty much. He felt there should be something built where the parents and the children could have fun together. That was the spark.
And it grew from there, because people were already coming to the studio, right, hoping for magic.
Exactly. Tourists would show up at the Disney studios in Hollywood expecting, Mickey Mouse to greet them at the door.
But finding offices.
Just offices, yeah. Sound stages. Kind of boring, really. So Walt wanted something that could buffer their disappointment, something tangible.
So the idea started small, like a corner of the studio back in the 40s.
Just a little themed corner.
Yeah.
Then it grew. By the early 50s, it was this plan for an 11-acre park across the street.
And his backyard railroad played a part, too, the one in Holmby Hills.
Oh, massively. He loved that little steam train.
Yeah.
And the sheer number of visitors he got at home, people wanting to see it, that really pushed him, made him take that little Mickey Mouse Park idea more seriously.
Okay, so Walt's convinced. But surely not everyone else was on board, especially within the company.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
He faced serious pushback. His own brother, Roy Oliver Disney, the CEO, highly skeptical.
Worried about the money, I bet.
Big time. Saw it as a huge financial risk to the studio they'd built. Even Walt's wife, Lillian, she asked him, "Why would you want that? Amusement parks are so dirty and dangerous."
And Walt's famous reply.
Simple. Defiant, really. That's just it. Mine wouldn't be. He wasn't just building another amusement park. He was inventing something new.
A theme park. But even with Roy being hesitant, he did some initial money for R&D.
Yeah, Roy agreed to set aside a little bit. But then, bam, the first big hurdle. The Burbank City Council
They said no.
flat out denied his request to build an amusement park there.
Mm-hmm.
That forced Walt to look elsewhere. A real pivot point.
But finding new land was one thing. Finding the money. That was the real mountain to climb, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Roy knew, that Walt's notes and ideas, just a pile of papers, wouldn't convince serious investors.
They needed to see it.
Exactly. They needed artwork, something compelling, which led to that famous weekend with Herb Ryman.
The artist who initially said no.
Right. Imagine being asked to visualize this completely new thing over a single weekend. But Walt was, very persuasive.
Stayed with him the whole time, pushing him.
Worked alongside him, and out came that first incredible rendering. The one Walt later named Disneyland. Apparently Ryman joked it sounded a bit egotistical.
But the name stuck.
Oh.
And that art, that was the key.
It was crucial. It laid out the whole vision. The 4 themed lands.
Adventureland, Tomorrowland.
Frontierland, Fantasyland with the castle and the carousel paying homage to that original idea, and the little railroad going all the way around. It made it real.
Still, the money problem didn't just vanish. Roy only gave him, 10 grand for R&D?
Just $10,000, yeah. Which is where Walt could get really clever. Or maybe audacious.
Retlaw Enterprises.
Yep, Walter spelled backward. He set up this separate company in 1950, basically, to license his own name back to Walt Disney Productions.
Seriously? For how much?
It secured about $3,000 a week for the park project. It was a way to fund his passion project and keep control. Pretty unconventional for the time.
Unheard of, probably. Shows his commitment, though.
Totally. And then he doubled down. In '52, he created Walt Disney Incorporated, which quickly became WED Enterprises, Walter Elias Disney,
Why the separate company?
to get complete control,
Yeah.
keep the park development separate from the studio's board of directors who might, interfere or water down his vision.
And that's where the Imagineers came from. WED.
That's the birthplace of the Imagineers, yeah. His hand-picked team. Imagination plus engineering.
So, okay, they have a vision, they have a team. Now they need the actual place. Not Burbank. Where next?
The big search began. Walt hired Harrison Buzz Price from the Stanford Research Institute. Gave him very specific marching orders.
At least 100 acres.
Yep. And crucially, not located anywhere near the beach.
Why not the beach? Worried about fog? Or certain types of visitors?
Probably a bit of both. He wanted it easily accessible, though, from all over Southern California.
So Buzz Price had his work cut out for him.
Oh, yeah. Scoured 5 counties, something like 35,000
Okay.
square miles. Huge area.
And he found?
The spot. 200 acres of orange and walnut groves down in sleepy rural Anaheim, California.
Anaheim. Why there?
Well, it was a cheap land back then, and it was right next to where the I-5 freeway was being built.
Ah, convenient access.
Perfect access from L.A. and San Diego.
Yeah.
But still far enough away from the big cities that maybe they could avoid some of the riffraff, as the thinking went. Strategic.
And there's that nice story about the palm trees, right? The Dominguez family.
Yeah, a really lovely touch. They sold their land, but had these 2 beautiful Canary Island date palms planted for a family wedding. Walt promised they'd stay.
They're still there.
Still there today,
Uh-huh.
inside the park. A promise kept.
Okay, land secured. But the money issue, still looming, right? Banks weren't convinced.
Not fully. Bank of America basically said, find a major backer, then we'll talk. It was still a massive gamble.
Enter ABC Television.
The pivotal moment, ABC agreed to fund a huge chunk of the construction. They got 35% ownership in return.
And Walt had to star in a weekly TV show?
The Disneyland show, which ironically became a huge hit and basically functioned as amazing marketing for the park. But yeah, that deal brought in a big part of the $17 million total funding.
$17 million in the 1950s.
A fortune. And even then, almost no one involved was fully convinced the idea would be a success. Think about that pressure.
And the deadline. That's the other crazy part. They started leveling the site July 16th, 54.
For a July 17th, 55 opening. Exactly 1 year.
That's insane for a project this size. How did that even work? What were the immediate
It
problems?
was controlled chaos, basically. Everything was rushed. Take the trees, for instance. Bill Evans, the horticultural Imagineer, wanted to save some of the orange trees, mark them with ribbons.
Makes sense. Save money. Keep some mature trees.
Right. Except, the story goes, a colorblind bulldozer driver came through and took them all out anyway, just guessing which ones to leave.
Oh no, you're kidding.
It speaks volumes about the pace, doesn't it? Just frantic.
So how did they even manage the landscaping after that? 60 acres is a lot to plant in a year.
Well, Bill Evans was brilliant. He found this existing line of tall eucalyptus trees on the property.
And use them.
Strategically.
Yeah.
They moved Adventureland over to the west side so those trees would act as a natural windbreak against the Santa Ana winds, protecting
Wow.
all the exotic jungle plants.
Smart. And Walt was inspired by Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, right? For the landscaping.
Yeah, he loved how lush and established Tivoli felt. So Bill Evans went on this global mission, acquiring plants, apparently even sneaking seeds in his socks back from trips.
Huh. Whatever it takes.
He even discovered a new philodendron species named Philodendron evansi after him. And they brought in Ruth Shellhorn, too, another landscape architect for the more civilized areas. Main Street, Fantasyland, making sure it all fit the theme.
Beyond plants, what about just the dirt? Building hills and rivers.
Massive earth moving. They dug out tons of dirt and used it to build the berms all around the park. Those big earthen walls.
To block out the real world.
Exactly. Keep the magic contained. Some berms were like 30 feet high. They even made Holiday Hill next to the castle with the leftover dirt.
But digging rivers in sandy soil, that sounds problematic.
It was. The rivers of America just wouldn't hold water initially. Soaked right in.
So what did they do?
They brought in Admiral Joe Fowler, retired Navy guy, logistics whiz. He found a source of local clay and lined the entire riverbed with it. Problem solved.
Clever. And Fowler also figured out the drainage.
Yeah, another smart move. Designed the park's drainage so rainwater runoff would flow into the rivers and moats, basically topping them off naturally. Sustainable even back then.
It sounds like the whole area had to adapt. Didn't Anaheim have to annex the land?
They did, 800 acres. Because the park needed basic city services, sewage, power, and those orange groves were mostly off-grid. It was a huge undertaking for Anaheim, too.
And the actual building construction, how did they manage that speed?
Prefabrication was key.
Yeah.
Really cutting edge for the time.
Meaning they built parts elsewhere.
Right. Things like the castle towers, the rooftops for Main Street Station, even the big Mark Twain riverboat sections were built off-site in the studio's Opera House building, then trucked over and assembled. Saved a ton of time.
Wow. And that innovative spirit carried over to the rides, too, like Autopia.
Definitely. Autopia was Walt's nod to California's brand new freeway system, a utopian auto motorway for kids.
But designing cars for kids to drive and crash, that sounds hard.
Immensely challenging for Bob Gurr, the engineer. He had to make these little cars super resilient. Single pedal, easy to drive, but able to withstand constant impacts without cracking the frame. The clutch and transmission design was apparently revolutionary for that kind of use.
The whole layout of the park was revolutionary, too, wasn't it? The spoke and wheel design.
Yeah, Walt hated how people got lost in traditional amusement parks. It broke the spell,
So Disneyland's design
was deliberate. Central Plaza, the hub, with the themed lands fanning out like spokes. Critically, only one exit for the whole park and only one entrance to each land. Kept people oriented, flowing naturally. It showed a deep understanding of how people move and experience this space.
And they use visual tricks, too. Forced perspective.
Oh, constantly. The Imagineers came from film, designing sets. They knew all about controlling sightlines. Main Street's a classic example.
How so?
The buildings at the far end, near the castle, are built slightly shorter, smaller scale. Makes the street look longer, more grand as you walk in.
And on the way out.
The buildings near the entrance are slightly larger. Makes the exit seem closer when you're tired at the end of the day. It's subtle psychological design, all about the guest experience.
That's brilliant. And the general scale, the 58 scale for buildings.
Right.
That adds to the charm.
Totally intentional. Makes everything feel more inviting, kind of cozy. But it's more complex than just one scale. Multi-story buildings use 3 different scales as they went up maybe 9-10 on the bottom, 5-8, then 12 scale on top.
To make them look taller.
Exactly. Creates that sense of charm and visual interest. Even Sleeping Beauty Castle uses varying scales at random just to mess with your perception, make it feel bigger, more fairy tale-like than it actually is.
But even with all this planning, that deadline meant compromises, right? Things they weren't happy with.
For sure. Some aesthetic things really bothered the Imagineers later. The castle's color scheme, that simple blue and gray, was apparently a rush job that haunted John Hench for years.
And Fantasyland wasn't quite the fairy tale village they wanted.
Had to settle for more of a medieval fair theme initially. And Tomorrowland. That was definitely the least complete area. Kind of a mishmash.
The bathroom of tomorrow.
Really? Yeah. Random corporate exhibits like that, sets left over from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Basically anything to fill the space before opening day.
Yeah.
Shows the pressure they were under.
But one thing Walt wouldn't compromise on was his railroad.
Never. His beloved Disneyland Railroad.
Yeah.
It was actually the single most expensive attraction in the park.
Because he was such a train enthusiast.
Lifelong passion. He insisted it operate just like the old steam trains, the old-fashioned puffers. Real steam, real whistles.
And the locomotives had specific names.
CK Holiday #1 and EP Ripley #2. Named after founders of the Santa Fe Railroad, which sponsored the attraction. It was Walt's personal stamp right at the entrance.
Okay, fast forward. It's days before opening, July 13th, 1955. Walt and Lillian's 30th anniversary party. Inside the park.
Right there at the Golden Horseshoe Saloon. Imagine the scene, the park still buzzing with last-minute work. Walt was apparently beaming with pride.
And he got emotional giving a speech.
Stood on a chair, ready to talk, and just froze. Got to speak for the first time, as the story goes. Overwhelmed. His daughter Sharon had to gently bring him back. Really shows how much it meant to him.
That's quite a moment. And Lillian was pitching in, too.
Yeah, Joe Fowler apparently found her sweeping the decks of the Mark Twain riverboat herself, making sure it was perfect. Everyone was truly all in.
Then came the day itself, July 17th, opening day, or Black Sunday.
Black Sunday, yeah. Roy Disney was apparently a nervous wreck about the live ABC broadcast. 29 cameras, millions watched.
And the traffic was already insane.
He drove down from L.A., hit miles of gridlock, thought it was construction. Nope, just people waiting to park their cars. He knew then it was going to be huge. Apparently saw kids peeing in the parking lot. There were so many people.
Oh, my goodness. So what actually went wrong? On camera, off camera?
Where to start? The heat was brutal, over 100 degrees. Dry ice for the cameras of melting everywhere.
Melting asphalt.
Had just been poured. Women's high heels were literally sinking into it. Then there was the plumber's strike.
No drinking fountains.
None working.
Right.
So people had to buy sodas from Pepsi and Coke, the sponsors.
Ugh.
Looked terrible. Actors were missing cues on live TV. The Mark Twain riverboat nearly capsized.
Wow.
It got packed with way too many people, filled with over 500 passengers. Water was apparently sloshing over the lower deck.
Cows.
Terrifying.
And the crowds, way over capacity.
Massively. Supposed to be maybe 18,000 invited guests. Ended up with 28,000 people.
Ow.
Invitations got passed around, copied. Tons of counterfeited tickets were sold outside. There was even a guy with a ladder charging people to climb over the fence.
You cannot be serious.
Yeah.
A ladder.
True story, apparently.
Yeah.
Inside, food ran out. Rides broke down. Autopia cars were failing left and right. A gas leak shut down most of Fantasyland for a while.
It sounds like utter chaos. Parents lifting kids over barriers.
People saw parents hoisting their children over the carousel barrier. Just desperate. It was a disaster unfolding live on national television.
How did Walt react? Was he aware during the broadcast?
Reports say he was mostly kept oblivious during the live show, kept his cool for the cameras. But afterwards, when he saw the mess, absolutely furious, yelling at the Imagineers, telling them to fix everything, repair the park, and get it operating again for the real public opening the next day.
Wow. But despite all that negative press, Black Sunday, the park was still a hit.
Instantly. It just continued to draw in hordes of visitors every day that summer. The bad publicity almost didn't matter. People wanted to see it.
And the numbers were staggering.
Unbelievable. Just 90 days after opening, its 1 millionth visitor passed through its turnstiles. 1 million in 90 days. Today, that number is closer to, 700 million total visitors. It defied the disastrous opening.
Which really begs the question, why did Disneyland succeed so spectacularly, especially when so many other amusement parks existed? What was the difference?
I think that quote you found from J.G. O'Boyle nails it. A theme park without rides is still a theme park. An amusement park without rides is a parking lot with popcorn.
Ah, the theme was the key, the immersion.
Totally. It wasn't just a collection of rides. It was the atmosphere, the story, the meticulous attention to detail, the costumes, the music, even hiding the real world behind those berms, keeping backstage stuff hidden with tunnels. It was a complete curated experience.
A 360-degree show.
Exactly. It fundamentally changed everything. It became this quintessential part of Americana, visited by everyone. Celebrities, heads of state, a place to escape.
Fulfilling that original goal?
Yeah.
A way for people to escape their woes, if only for a day.
And Walt truly believed in that power. Remember that story with Billy Graham?
Oh, yeah, where Graham called it a fantasy.
And Walt fired back, basically saying, no, this is the real world. Look around, people from everywhere, all smiling, having fun together. The fantasy, the unreality is out there, outside the park gates, with all the hate and prejudice.
That's a powerful perspective. Shows how deeply he believed in what he built.
He poured everything into it. And he was never done. Always never satisfied with the status quo.
The block of clay idea?
Exactly. Disneyland was his block of clay, which he could continuously keep sculpting and shaping. Always adding, always changing, always giving people a new reason to come. That constant evolution was vital.
He got to enjoy it for about 11 years, right? Before he passed away in 66.
Yeah, 11 years seeing his dream thrive. He died relatively young, 65. But the impact... It's immense, that deep emotional and cultural impact.
It tapped into something fundamental, didn't it? His ability to connect.
To create an emotional connection with his audience. Made people believe, even for a day, that when you wish upon a star, your dreams can come true. He didn't just build a park, he built a feeling, a shared experience.
So thinking about that block of clay idea, Walt was famously never satisfied, always evolving Disneyland. If he were still around today, what do you think he'd be sculpting or shaping about the park now? And what might that tell us about where immersive entertainment could be headed?